Welcome, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Well, tonight we're returning to our study of the Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C.Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. And tonight we will continue from where we left off, which was a little time ago. Last time we had a class was October. We're now in December of 2024. So it's been 7 weeks or so since we last met. A little break, but now continue on a regular basis on Wednesday nights. Next Wednesday will be Christmas Day, so we won't have a class on that day because we may be busy with other responsibilities. But
take it.
We focused on the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Nat, I think you just have to turn your microphone off.
Roger that.
Thank you. So the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is called Observing the Armies on the Battlefield. So it's Arjuna understanding that he does not want to fight the battle occur, etc., because it's a fratricidal war. It's a war between family members, and we can only imagine what it would be like having to fight and kill family members, cousins, and so forth. It would be a very difficult task. But Krishna asks him to continue on the course of fighting the battle and winning the war on behalf of his brother Yudhishthira, to establish a dharmic government on the earth, because it is necessary for human society to progress spiritually, even materially. We need a government which is dharmic, which means they follow principles that lead us to God realization and self-realization. And we can see in the world that's a lacking in modern society, modern culture, that we don't have governments which help to focus the citizens on spiritual understanding. And we can see the world is chaotic as a result. So Krishna wanted the fight, even though it was such a difficult situation. And one of the reasons that Krishna insisted that Arjuna fight this battle and have to overcome such a difficult test of having to fight his own family was because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, he wants to invoke surrender in the heart of his devotee. So he wants his devotee to surrender unto him, to surrender unto God. Mame kam sharana braja, surrender to me. So when Arjuna is asked to do the most difficult thing, it means he has to surrender. He has to give up so much of his personal desire for the satisfaction of Krishna. And that is ultimately, that's the message of the Bhagavad Gita, that we have to give up our own selfish desires for the pleasure of God, the pleasure of Krishna. So that's what Arjuna is asked to do. And that's what ultimately all of us have to do also, who are followers of Krishna, who are surrendered unto Krishna. So that is the message of the Gita. So the first chapter is more or less setting the scene for the battle. And Arjuna sees all of his relatives and he gives various excuses why he doesn't want to fight the battle. And now Krishna is answering those doubts of Arjuna. So in the beginning of the second chapter, which is the contents of the Gita summarized, the chapter we're currently in, which is the second longest chapter in the Bhagavad Gita, besides chapter 18, Arjuna is being instructed by Krishna, he surrenders to Krishna. He says, Shishas, Teham, Satimam, Twam Prapanam. Now I am a disciple of yours. I am a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So the message that we learn from this beginning of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is, if we do not have a submissive attitude towards God and his representative, the gurus, in disciplic succession, in parampara, then we cannot hear properly the message, the spiritual message of the Bhagavad Gita. So when he did surrender to Krishna and he was willing to hear Krishna's instructions, then Krishna begins to speak. Now, what's the first topic that Krishna focuses on in the second chapter from verses 11 to 30, which is what we covered last time? It is Gyan. Jnana means knowledge, transcendental knowledge, Divya Gyan. Now, what is the knowledge that Krishna focuses on? You are not the body, you are the soul. The difference between matter and spirit. That is what Krishna focuses on in the Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning. Because that's where true spiritual life begins, with this point. Now, tonight we're beginning with verse 31 of chapter 2. And now Krishna will change his tact, because when we're trying to convince someone of something, we will use different approaches and different arguments, because different people require different types of persuasion. Some people you can be logical with. Some people you have to be forceful with. There's different ways of setting forward an argument. So Krishna is using different tactics in order to invoke Arjuna's anger so that he can fight this dharmic war, because you cannot fight unless you're angry. It's not possible. You cannot fight effectively unless you're angry. So Krishna, he first of all has to invoke this anger, but it's divine anger, it's spiritual anger. Because he's using this anger in the service of Krishna to bring about a better society. We're not against anger when it's used in the appropriate way. That's what the Bhagavad Gita is teaching us here. So tonight we'll begin with text number 31. If you have any questions or comments as we go, then please ask. Considering your specific duty as a Kshatriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles. And so there is no need for hesitation. So Prabhupada says in the purport that discharging one's specific duty in any field of action in accordance with the orders of high authorities serves to elevate one to a higher status of life. So we all have responsibilities in this world, right? And the responsibility of a Kshatriya, a warrior, a military person, or a king, is to protect the citizens. So Arjuna, that is his duty. His duty is to protect the citizens. So, unfortunately, where we have unholy wars on the planet, we see that sometimes in different religions, in the name of religion, there are extremists. And they say that we are performing this jihad, or this particular holy war, on behalf of God. But if you're going to make such a bold claim, you have to be sure that you are actually representing God. And unfortunately, many of these modern so-called religious wars or holy wars are not actually God's desire. However, in this case, in the Bhagavad Gita, God himself, Krishna himself, is on the battle field of Kurukshetra, and he is directing the war. He's encouraging the war. Why? Because sometimes war is necessary, fighting is necessary, anger is necessary to remove ignorance so that people can become God conscious and Krishna conscious and self-realized. So because Arjuna's responsibility is to create a society where people can follow Varnashram Dharma, where they can follow a religious, spiritual way of life, Krishna is saying, this is your duty. So therefore, do not hesitate. So once again, we have to make sure that we're following the right authority. Otherwise, as we see in the modern world, so many mistakes are made in the name of God, but actually it's coming from the desires of men. But in this case, we understand spiritually and philosophically that this war was actually a holy war. So it was justified in this circumstance. Text number 32. O Partha, happy are the Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors to the heavenly planets. So this is something which is mentioned within the Vedic scriptures, the ancient scriptures of India, that if one lives a righteous life, if one lives a Krishna conscious existence, if one follows the teachings of Krishna, actually follows them, one is guaranteed to be taken to a higher destination at the end of this life. In other words, you will transcend. You will go to a higher destination in the next life. If one lives righteously and follows the teachings of Krishna, one will go to a higher destination. Now, for a Kshatriya, a warrior who is protecting others and fighting on behalf of others, doing his duty, he's guaranteed at the very minimum to go to Swaga. Swaga means heavenly planets, higher planets, the sun planet. One can take place on these planets where higher culture and higher philosophical understanding exists. So that is the position. If one dies on the battlefield, fighting righteously, one will go to a higher destination. So that is mentioned here within the Vedic scriptures. Once again, unfortunately, in the modern world, sometimes people say that they will die for their understanding of their religion or God, and they think that they're going to a higher destination, but it doesn't always work like that. Because sometimes they're acting immorally, sometimes they're acting ignorantly. So they don't necessarily go to a higher destination, but if you do act properly, if you do follow a bona fide authority, you will go to a higher destination. That's guaranteed. Text number 33. If, however, you do not perform your religious duty of fighting, then you will certainly incur sins for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. So, if we don't do our duty, we incur sin. In other words, if you are a warrior, a Kshatriya, a king, a prince, whatever it may be, that is your position in society, and you neglect your duty to protect others, if you're not willing to die for others, if you're not willing to protect others, you will incur sin, papa, which means you will receive negative karma for not doing your duty properly. Like if you have a child and you don't look after the child, you will receive negative karma. If you are a warrior and you're not willing to die and fight for your citizens, you will receive negative karma, bad karma. So Krishna says to Arjuna, if you don't fight, you'll incur sin and you'll lose your reputation as a fighter. So what does this mean, to lose one's reputation? This is not a material thing, right? To lose one's reputation, it's not material. It can be material to be worried about losing your reputation, but in spiritual circles, maintaining your reputation and your character is all important. In other words, if people lose faith in you because your character is not good, you don't behave properly, you'll lose your reputation. And then and we see that's what's happened all over the world in this modern era. People have lost faith in religious leaders, right? In spiritual leaders. Why? Because their faith has been broken by seeing people neglect their duty. You know, sometimes we see the character of the so-called religious people is not actually intact. And then people lose faith. They think, I can't trust these people. So therefore, if you lose your reputation as a spiritual leader, it's extremely damaging for yourself, but especially for others. Right? If others lose faith in you as a religious teacher, as a religious leader, right? Or as in this case, for Arjuna, as a warrior, a kshatriya, a prince, right? In the traditional times, the prince, the warriors, they were meant to give us protection. So if he walks away from the fight, everyone will say, look, right? He's lost his reputation. You can't trust him. He will not protect us. So Krishna is using these different tactics or these different arguments in order to persuade Arjuna. Don't give up the battle. As difficult as it is, don't give it up. And what is the message for us? As difficult as life gets, don't give up our duty. Don't give up our service to Krishna. Even though life gets very difficult sometimes, but we must not give up our duty and our service. Text number 34. People will always speak of your infamy. And for a respectable person, dishonor is worse than death. Prabhupada says in the purport, both as a friend and a philosopher to Arjuna, Lord Krishna now gives his final judgment regarding Arjuna's refusal to fight. The Lord says, Arjuna, if you leave the battlefield before the battle even begins, people will call you a coward. And if you think that people may call you bad names, but that you will save your life by fleeing the battlefield, then my advice is that you do better to die in the battle. For a respectable person like you, ill fame is worse than death. Right? It's worse than death to lose your respectability within society, especially in a culture like that, in these ancient cultures. If you did not do your duty, you would be disrespected, and that's worse than death, to be dishonorable. This is something which is very difficult for people to understand in the modern age, in Kali Yuga. You know, people act dishonorably all the time. But in a cultured civilization, this is worse than death. Right? To lose your reputation, to everyone say, just look at what they did. We can't trust them. Right? This is worse than death, to act like this. Text number 35. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you insignificant. Prabhupada says in the purport. Lord Krishna continued to give his verdict to Arjuna. Do not think that the great generals like Duryodhana, Karna, and other contemporaries will think that you have left the battlefield out of compassion for your brothers and grandfather. They will think that you have left out of fear for your life, and thus their high estimation of your personality will go to hell. So, Arjuna, he has such a reputation on the planet. If you read the Mahabharata, or the Bhagavad Gita, or Harivamsha, right? These different shastras, these different scriptures. Arjuna was such an influential warrior, so famous. Like these days, we have sports stars, you know, like Michael Jordan, or so many great, you know, sports stars, but they're idolized by people. But in the previous ages, the warriors, the princes, the Kshatriyas, they were idolized by society because they protected society. They were heroic. They were noble. They were virtuous. Right? They were idolized by people. So, Arjuna, he was so famous and so powerful that even Krishna's children, Pradyumna, Samba, all of Krishna's sons, who were great warriors themselves, as they were growing up, they would challenge each other in practicing combat and so forth, and they would often boast to each other, I challenge you in the name of Arjuna. He was like the idol of the warrior class of society. So the fact that he's talking about leaving the battlefield, walking off the battlefield, Krishna is saying, do you think your enemies, your competitors, Duryodhana, Karna, do you think they'll say, oh, look, Arjuna's walking away because he's a compassionate person? No, they will say, look, he's fearful of us. That's why he's walking away. Right? And a Kshatriya would rather die on the battlefield than walk away from the battle. That's a real warrior. He's like that. That's his mentality. So he's saying to Arjuna, Arjuna, don't think everyone will glorify you for walking away from the battlefield. Do your duty. Text number 36. Your enemies will describe you in many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful for you? Prabhupada says in the purport, Lord Krishna was astonished in the beginning at Arjuna's uncalled for plea for compassion, and he described his compassion as befitting the non-Aryans, Now, in so many words, he has proved his statements against Arjuna's so-called compassion. So, as Prabhupada says, it is not befitting the Aryan race. The Aryan race means the civilized race. Right? People who are civilized must do their duty. If you don't do your duty, you are not considered to be a civilized person, a cultured person. So for Arjuna to be even talking about giving up his duty of protecting others is considered disgraceful. So here it is being mentioned. Krishna is saying, you can't walk away. It's against everything that you've been taught up until now. Text number 37. O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdom. Therefore, get up with determination and fight. So, Krishna is basically saying, either way, you're in a very beneficial situation. Either you will win the battle, and then you'll be the emperor or the brother of the emperor of the earth, and you can rule on behalf of Krishna himself, or you lose the battle, you die, and you'll go to the heavenly planets, to Swaga. So either way, you're in a very beneficial situation. Right? What could be better for you? Right? And it's something we need to realize as devotees of Krishna in our lives. Sometimes we have choices in life. Sometimes we come to a crossroads and we have choices. I can turn left, I can turn right. I have choices. So we're all given choices, right, as devotees. But one thing we need to realize as time goes by is no matter which choice we make, sometimes we're given like different service opportunities. So we can choose to do this particular service for Krishna or that particular service for Krishna. Either way, it is considered completely auspicious because you're serving Krishna. So you serve him this way or that way. Both are good. Right? Sometimes our gurus, Kanambakan Swami, sometimes devotees would ask him, what should I do? Should I do this? He said, both are good. Both are good. If we are confused about what we should do, if we have a circumstance that we have to consider, should I go this way or that way? Should I act like this or act like that? We consult with our authorities. We go to our gurus and we ask them, what should I do under this circumstance? Should I act like this? Should I act like that? And then under their guidance, we will understand what is the best situation for us. And that's ultimately what Arjuna does with Krishna. He says, Krishna, you tell me what is best. Krishna said, fight. And either way, if you fight, you'll go to a higher destination or you'll rule the earth. Both are good. Text number 38. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. and by so doing you shall never incur sin. So you will never incur sin if you act following authority. Right? Krishna says that to Arjuna. Do your fight. Don't consider duality. Don't consider loss or gain, victory or defeat, happiness or distress. Don't consider these things. These are irrelevant. Right? Don't consider these things. Right? It's not relevant to you what we shall do. So when we're doing our duty, when we're doing our service to Krishna, we don't consider loss or gain, happiness or distress, victory or defeat. We just do the service. Sometimes it may be difficult. Sometimes it may be enjoyable. That's not the main focus. Right? The main focus is that we should be pleasing Krishna, serving Krishna. So if we do this, we'll never incur sin. We'll always be in a auspicious situation. Prabhupada says, Lord Krishna now directly says that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting because he desires the battle. There is no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or gain, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. That everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is transcendental consciousness. So there is no reaction to material activities. In other words, if you kill someone, you will receive punishment in this life, but more importantly, you will receive punishment after this life. If you kill someone, that's bad karma, and you will receive punishment. However, if you serve Krishna and act on behalf of Krishna, you will never receive punishment. Right? You will never get sinful reactions. Right? You will be rewarded and reciprocated with by Krishna himself. There is no karma. It is later in Bhagavad Gita, it will be described to be akarma. Akarma means without karma. When you serve Krishna, there is no karma. That's why it is the preferred activity for the soul to serve Krishna. Okay, so that section, verses 31 to 38, Arjuna is being encouraged to do his duty. Verses 11 to 30, Krishna is saying, you are not the body, you are the soul. So there is nothing to worry about. You don't actually kill anyone. Of course, Prabhupada says we should not use that as an excuse to kill. But Krishna was giving that point. Now, verses 31 to 38, Krishna is saying, do your duty. And now Krishna is going to begin to describe fighting or acting without reaction, which is nishkama, karma yoga, or bhakti yoga, or devotional service. So these are some very important verses that we're about to read. Very important verses, very significant verses, very well-known verses from the Bhagavad Gita. Thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Prabhupada says in the purport, Arjuna has already accepted Krishna as his spiritual master, his guru, by rendering himself unto him. Shishasteham satimam tvam prapanam. Consequently, Krishna will now tell him about the working process of buddhi yoga or karma yoga, or in other words, the practice of devotional service, only for the sense gratification of the Lord. The buddhi yoga, this buddhi yoga, is clearly explained in chapter 10, verse 10, as being direct communion with the Lord, who is sitting as Paramatma in everyone's heart. But such communion does not take place without devotional service. One who is therefore situated in devotional or transcendental loving service to the Lord, or in other words, in Krishna consciousness, attains to this stage of buddhi yoga by the special grace of the Lord. The Lord says, therefore, that only to those who are always engaged in devotional service out of transcendental love does he award the pure knowledge of devotion and love. In that way, the devotee can reach him in the ever blissful kingdom of God. So, in this verse, Krishna is speaking of buddhi. He uses the term buddhi yoga, which he uses many more times in this particular chapter, in chapter 2 of the Gita. Buddhi yoga means working. Buddhi literally means intelligence. Sometimes we might call someone Buddha. Buddha means one who is enlightened, one who has advanced intelligence. So buddhi yoga means acting with intelligence or acting with knowledge. Because when you have knowledge, you make the right decisions in life. When you don't have knowledge, you make the wrong decisions in life. So one who is spiritually progressed, they make the right decisions in life. Why? Because they understand everything from the spiritual platform. So this is buddhi yoga, which Krishna is speaking about here. When you do this, Krishna says you free yourself from the bondage of work, karma bandhana. In other words, when you act with knowledge, when you act for the service of Krishna or the pleasure of Krishna with transcendental knowledge, you do not receive any karma. Such a powerful methodology. So this is mentioned here. Krishna mentions this in this verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Verse number 40. This is a very famous verse. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So, in this verse, Krishna says alpa. Alpa means small, very little. Even if you just do a little bit of devotional service, of service to Krishna, of service to God, you will not receive any reaction. And it will protect you from the most dangerous type of fear. Prabhupada explains, what is that? Taking a lower birth, going to the animal species. or the plant species, taking birth as an animal or an insect or a plant, because you misused your human form of life. So when you do devotional service and you become enlightened and you understand the concept of devotional service, you do not regress back. Right? You don't fall back. You make progress. It protects you from taking birth in the lower species of life. Now, verse number 41. This is a very famous verse, and it's considered to be an important verse for the members of ISKCON, the members of the Hare Krishna movement, the ISKCON devotees. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. Now, Srila Prabhupada was reading this verse and the commentary on this verse. Now, Prabhupada made some very important statements. One statement that Prabhupada made was the purports or the commentaries are even more important than the original verses of the Vedic texts. And that's a very powerful statement because, the verses themselves are the Vedic texts. They are the truth. They are the source of enlightenment for humanity. However, Prabhupada says even more important are the purports or the commentaries of the acharyas, of the previous gurus, the previous spiritual preceptors, the teachers. Right. So, in the commentary on this particular verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of the great saints from the past, he is mentioned. And Prabhupada read this back in the 1950s before he came to America and began the Hare Krishna movement. Srila Prabhupada said that he read the commentary on this verse from Vishwanath Chakravarti, and he said it struck him. It was a life-changing moment and situation. So we'll read what it is that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur wrote, and we'll discuss how it struck Srila Prabhupada. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, of all kinds of intelligence, the best is intelligence focused on bhakti yoga. In bhakti yoga, one's intelligence becomes single-pointed or fixed in determination. One thinks, the instructions of my spiritual master who worship the personality of Godhead by chanting, remembering, serving his feet, and so on, are my only sadhana. My only sajja, my only livelihood. I am unable to give up these instructions either at this stage of practice or in the stage of perfection. They alone are my object of desire and my only responsibility. Besides them, I can desire no other responsibility, not even in dreams. It is all the same to me whether I feel happy or unhappy, or whether my material existence is eradicated or not. So, Srila Prabhupada said that when he wrote that, when he read that instruction or that commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he said it struck him. Why? because this is the definition of buddhi yoga, vyavasayatmika buddhi, fixed intelligence. We should fix our intelligence on the instructions or the orders we receive from our gurus. Why? Because by following that instruction perfectly, that will lead us back to Godhead. It will lead us back to Krishna. It will lead us back to perfection in our Krishna consciousness. So therefore, this should be the pride of the disciple. Prabhupada says it is the pride of the instructions we receive from the Guru. Generic and specific instructions, personal instructions and general instructions. These instructions will take us back to Krishna if we follow them perfect. That is Ekeha Kudananda, that is perfect fixation in Krishna consciousness. Any points so far? Okay. Text number 42 and 43. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there is nothing more than this. So, many people follow, as is described here, the flowery words of the Vedas. In other words, in many teachings of the world, it is described, if you follow pious activity, religious activity, regulated activity, as described in these teachings, you will be able to attain enjoyment in this world from various sources. You can go to higher planets, you can enjoy more greatly, but you have to follow these certain rules and regulations. So, as devotees of Krishna, we understand that we should not become bewildered by these flowery words or these promises of enjoyment in this world, because it is temporary. Therefore, we want to focus on higher enjoyment. So for devotees, we do not become bewildered. Prabhupada says in the purport, unenlightened men are essentially attached to material, temporary happiness as lords of material nature. It is very difficult for such persons to be situated in the determined action of Krishna consciousness. You won't be able to focus on your spiritual life if you're too attached to trying to enjoy in this world. Therefore, we have to give up our enjoyment in this world. Right? We have to learn to satisfy the senses of Krishna, and by doing so, we will feel a higher pleasure, a superior pleasure within this material world. Text number 44. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. Prabhupada says in the purport, when the mind is fixed for understanding the self, it is said to be in samadhi. Samadhi is never possible for persons interested in material sense enjoyment. They are condemned by the process of material energy. So we have to focus our minds, our consciousness on receiving pleasure from serving Krishna, and gradually give up our attachment to enjoying sense gratification in this material world. Otherwise, the resolute determination, when you are too attached to sense gratification, vishaya, or enjoying in this material world, the resolute determination, the determination to become Krishna conscious, to become self-realized, closer to God, it doesn't take place. Sense gratification, or the desire to enjoy separate from Krishna in this material world, weakens our determination. Many years ago, I asked Korma Prabhu, who is one of our advanced devotees in our Krishna consciousness movement. I said to him, what is the source of determination? He said, celibacy. In other words, if you give up your desire to enjoy your senses in this world, then you will become very determined in spiritual life. That's why celibacy is so important. Because when we give up that desire to enjoy our senses separate from Krishna, we become very fixed in devotional service. Text number 5. The Vedas deal mainly with the subject of the 3 modes of material nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these 3 modes. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. So Prabhupada says in the purport that one must learn to be tolerant. Krishna mentions this in the early part of this chapter, titikshasva. We must learn titiksha, which means tolerance. We must learn to detach ourselves from enjoying in this world, tolerate the pushings of the senses, the mind and the senses, and focus our determination on becoming Krishna conscious, on becoming focused on serving Krishna in this material world. And the last verse that we'll read for tonight is number 46. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. So it is being mentioned that Prabhupada says in the purport, in this age of Kali, the best purpose of Vedanta philosophy is served by inoffensively chanting the holy name, as recommended by Lord Chaitanya, the deliverer of the fallen souls. So, what is the best way to understand or to become self-realized in this day and age? It is to chant the holy names of Krishna, perform Sankirtan. And when one engages in this Yuga Dharma of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, then one becomes a self-realized soul. One becomes fully Krishna conscious. That is the process to overcome our material desires and attachment in this material world. So I'll stop here for tonight. No class next week, but then the week after we'll continue with our study of the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Does anyone have any questions or comments on anything we've discussed tonight? Thank you all for coming. And we'll see you soon. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Babu.
Thank you for coming.
Very good.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Hare Krishna.